Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In letter 109, Seneca is responding to what we must assume to be a request to examine a certain topic on the part of his interlocutor Lucilius, and the question that he's going to begin with is, can one wise person help another wise person? And there's good reasons why we would ask this from a Stoic perspective, because if you look at the characterizations of the Stoic wise person that the Stoics put forward, we could say maximal. The wise person is supposed to be completely virtuous, self-sufficient. They are going to be more or less successful in anything they turn their hands to, unless other things intervene. And you could say, well, why would somebody who doesn't need anything, why would they need or want or desire, pick whatever other term you want, friends, companions? Even if they are other wise people, why would it be important that they exist in a kind of fellowship? And I do want to point something out towards the end of the letter before we jump into Seneca's arguments for this. He says that I've dealt with your demand, Lucilius, although its place was in the set of topics I'm covering in my works on ethics. And as I keep telling you, please realize that all we're doing with such questions is exercising the intellect. I always have to come back to thinking, how does this topic help me? How does it help to know about the wise person? Is it going to make me more courageous? That's a virtue for the Stoics. More just, more self-controlled. I'm not yet ready for action. I need the doctor. I need to work on myself. I'm not a wise person. So in a certain way, being too concerned with the status of the legendary, perhaps non-existent, wise person could be a bit of a distraction from what it is that we need to focus on. Now, that said, Seneca does provide a lot of discussion about how it is that one wise person can actually be beneficial and helpful to another wise person. And this is a topic that he takes up at other places. But in this letter, he's going to provide us some really interesting considerations, arguments, reasons for why we should think that. So he says, we Stoics say that a wise person is one who has every good thing and has attained the very summit, the high point of things. How then, the question goes, is it possible to help anyone else who already possesses the ultimate, the highest good? So Seneca says, well, good people are helpful, beneficial to each other. They literally are there beneficially for each other, prosunt inter se, because each, and it's translated here as gives exercise to the other's virtues, keeping his wisdom in the stance proper to it. So, if you have a virtue, it's not enough just to have developed that virtue within you. You need to make it actual. You need to do something with it. It's kind of like you actually get the sense here, use it or lose it, buddy. If you're not using it, in a certain sense, you're making it inactive and less than what it ought to be. So he says that each of them needs someone to compare and investigate with, right? There's still a need on each other's part. And then he has some examples here. Practice is training for proficient wrestlers. Even if you're good, you still practice with somebody else. Musicians are stimulated by those who are as expert as themselves. So, you can think about any martial art, you need to actually spar with other people. If you're going to be a musician, of course you can play on your own, but playing with other musicians is going to make you a better musician. And we could think this way about philosophers. Should you retire into the, whatever it's going to be, the hermitage, the cave? No, you should actually be engaging with other people. He goes on and he says, the sage too needs his virtues to be activated, literally to be moved. The verb movere is used throughout here. And, moved in the sense, the very broad metaphysical sense of changed in some important way, put into motion. So activation works, other terms can be used there. And how does this actually happen? So he says, the sage, just as they make themselves active, they're made active by another person who's wise. How? By giving him a prod, by saying, hey, put your attention over there. Or isn't this an occasion where you need to exercise this virtue? Demonstrating opportunities for honorable action, saying, hey, you could be doing something in this particular case. Then he says, the wise person will also give utterance to some of their own reflections and let the others learn his discoveries. So they talk with each other. They sometimes introduce new considerations the other one hadn't thought of before. And this is all, important ways in which they can help each other. He goes on and says a bad person is actually going to be, bad for a bad person, but good people are going to help each other. And then he's asked, well, how? Well, one, interestingly, has to do with emotions, with the good passions, or the good emotional states, the eupathai. So feeling joy, gaudium, similar thing, delight, laetitia. Those are good feelings to have. That's what a Stoic should have. And the wise person will actually feel joy or delight in the friend and in the things that they do together. They'll also feel a sense of confidence, fiduciam in this. Fiducia is the nominative of that. And tranquility, tranquilitas, that state that they're aiming at. All of these are going to happen through their interaction. He also says they'll pass on to each other knowledge of certain things. Why is that important? Because the sage doesn't know everything, right? The sage is not infallible and omniscient and all these other things that we might attribute to a godlike, status human being. The sage can still get things wrong or be missing important information. He goes on, even if he did have such knowledge, somebody might be able to figure out shorter ways to get to the facts and point those out to him, making it easier to understand, to comprehend the entire matter. And then he also says something I think is really interesting here. The wise person will help another not only with his own strength, but with the strength of the one he helps. So in a way, the whole of the relationship composed of two wise people in a fellowship or friendship is greater than the sum of its parts. So, that's quite interesting there. And then he considers a few objections. One of these objections is not particularly good. One wise person doesn't really help another. Each helps himself. And he says, to grasp this, just remove the distinctive ability from one of them. The other will have nothing to activate. And then there's this discussion about honey, which doesn't actually seem particularly on point there. Let's jump to the one that seems to be a bigger objection, more at the heart of things. So, heat. And now you have to understand that the ancients didn't have the same conception of heat that modern physics provides us in the present. They thought of heat as something that could reach like a maximal point, and hot things make other things hot, right? Or they bring out the heat in other things. Fire is a great example. So if you're already very, very hot, why do you need to add more heat? Similarly, somebody who's already got all the good things, why do they need any help? What are you contributing to this? So he gives a couple, fortifying examples. Does a fully equipped farmer ask somebody else for equipment? No, they've got everything they need. Does a soldier who's adequately armed for the front line need any additional weapons? No. So too, the wise man has no needs. He's sufficiently equipped and armed for life. So Seneca takes this one seriously. And he says, here's my response. So first off, even something extremely hot needs a supply of heat to maintain that degree of temperature. And then, somebody's going to say, but heat is essentially hot. And Seneca will say, fine. Here's the problem. This is a bad analogy. Heat is one single thing that we can find in all of these physical phenomena. Help doesn't name one thing, one quality like heat, right? Help comes in many forms. So that's, pointing out that it's not a great analogy. But then he goes on and he says, the wise person can't actually maintain their state of mind, their habitu mentis, this sort of complex character that is woven into their very personality. They can't do that, Seneca says, without some sort of friendship with people who are like them. So this is actually a pretty radical move on Seneca's part, saying, yes, the wise person has attained the peak of virtue. Yes, they are self-sufficient, but no, they can't actually maintain themselves in that status if they don't have some sort of connection, some sort of relationship with other people like themselves. Now, I think you could say Seneca wants to assume that the wise person does in fact have that. They're going to seek out other wise people, and there's other ways in which we could be, if we were wise, connected with other wise people within what the Stoics call the commonwealth of human beings and gods. So he's actually saying that the wise person, in a certain sense, does need other wise people in order to maintain themselves as a wise person. So he talks about mutual friendship among the virtues, and help is provided by one who loves the virtues of a person like himself, and who in return supplies his own virtues to be loved. He also says the mind of one who is wise can be activated in an expert manner only by another wise person, just as only a human being can activate another human being in a rational way. You can't get it from a doggy or, waterfalls or whatever. So reason is needed to motivate. And again, you see this verb, movendum, right? Coming from movere, to motivate or actuate or activate reason. Perfect reason is needed to motivate perfect reason. So wise people, and again, in a certain sense, need each other, or at least other perfectly rational beings, perhaps the gods in traditional Stoic cosmology. Then he goes on and talks about the word help being used for what he calls intermediate things. These are what the Stoics typically called the externals and indifference. We could also call them, as Seneca is willing to do in other letters, lesser goods. He's writing to Lucilius, who's used to thinking in those terms, not ultimate goods, right? So what would these include? Income, influence, safety, other things that are appreciated or needed. And, he says the wise person will get help from even foolish people with those. The foolish person can help the wise person out with providing them with some money or safety or things like that. Genuine help, he says, consists in activating a mind in accordance with nature, both by means of the helper's own virtue, the one who's doing the activating, and the virtue of one who's activated. So you have to help out in that way. And then he says, if we set aside the ultimate goods, the wise can still help each other in other ways. He says, for one of them to find another one is something choice-worthy in itself. Why? Because every good thing is naturally dear to every other good thing. Each of them is much attached to a good person as he is to himself. So, you enjoy finding other good people and interacting with them. You will choose that naturally, right? That makes sense. Another thing that he brings up here is that the wise person seeks advice from others. That's part of what actually makes them wise, is the fact that they recognize that they do need to seek advice. So what would be examples of this? He says in ordinary public and private business, it would be stupid for them not to seek out, for example, the doctor, if you're sick, the helmsman, if you want to go somewhere on a ship, the lawyer, if you've got a case, the magistrate, right? All of these people need advice from other people, and the wise person will also probably be, consulting them. And so one wise person can help another wise person with that advice. For example, a course of action. They'll also be useful in weighty and elevated matters by sharing views about honorable things and contributing thoughts and reflections. They help each other out. They supply what the other might figure out but doesn't figure out, and it can speed things up, we could say, or make them more clear. You could be virtuous and go to another wise person and say, I'm a little bit confused about what the virtuous thing is in this case. Can you just give me a up or down on this? Tell me whether I'm getting it right. And they could be like, yeah, you got it right. That would be prudent. He also talks about, embracing friends and taking pleasure in friends' advancement as if it were one's own. So growth is actually the better term here. Auctu, coming from augere, to grow, to increase. So seeing your friend prosper makes you feel good. And he goes on and says, ideally the wise person finds another wise person, or somebody who's really close to being a wise person. The way he puts it, one whose progress is close to perfection. But, most likely the wise person is going to be in a community with others as well. And, those others are not totally wrong and stupid and off base, right? So they, are going to work together. And he provides us at the very end of this talking about, our plans in business are aided by our wise friends' views and working together, cooperation. So, he says that there are some things even the wise person will see more accurately in cases that are not their own. So they can help each other out that way. And they give each other the sweetest and most honorable gift of having the same wishes, same rational desires, and the same aversions. And by working together, by cooperating, they produce an excellent result. So Seneca here has given us a number of reasons why somebody who is a Stoic should, despite thinking that the wise person is genuinely self-sufficient and at the pinnacle of wisdom and virtue, why they should want to have another wise person, at least one, in their life to not just be neighbors with, but to be friends with, to have fellowship with, so that both of them can live a better life.